Am I the a-hole for abandoning my dad's pregnant widow? My dad died several weeks ago. It was just the two of us for years after my mom died when I, 16M, was a baby. He got remarried 3 years ago. I never liked his wife, but I loved my dad, so I never told him I didn't like her, and I tolerated her being around. She was always really eager to get close to me, and I get it might have made her nervous and might be why she was so frustrating and unlikable to me. She'd say stuff like, "At least you never knew your mom," and she tried to correct it, but she'd make it worse by saying it was a good thing I didn't remember my mom. She'd also say she took mom's place, and again she'd backtrack and say not what she meant, and sometimes she'd say she wanted to help fill in for her, but other times she'd say she meant she was the new wife and mom. The other thing was she really wanted me to give her a nickname that was kinda motherly like Ma or Mama A. She drove me crazy with that. She and dad decided to have a kid together and couldn't, so they used donor sperm at a bank, meaning dad was going to raise the kid, but they wouldn't have his DNA. They just discovered she was pregnant when dad died. She tried to cling on to me, but I moved in with my uncle before the day was over. I didn't want to live with her. I packed up all the important stuff and I left with my uncle. She begged me to stay and told me to think about the baby, my sibling, etc. I didn't see her after the funeral. She's tried to say we're family and stuff, but I told her we're not. She asked about the baby, and I told her the baby isn't biologically my dad's, and he's dead now, and won't get to raise the kid, so I don't want to know the baby either. She told me abandoning her like that was shifty, and abandoning my sibling even shiftier. She said she still has to appear in court when the baby's born to get dad on the birth certificate, and it would help if I spoke in favor of it since they need people to do it. I told her I won't, and she needs to get over it. She screamed at me down the phone the other night because she realized I had blocked her number, and she got a new one, and she mentioned abandoning them again. Am I the a-hole? Am I the a-hole for not giving up my husband's seat on a plane? This happened to us while flying to France out of Raleigh. My husband and I had booked our aisle and middle seats together. While boarding, my husband got up to use the bathroom before the pre-flight announcements. As we double-checked our seat location, there was a woman already sitting in the window seat of our row with a baby. As soon as I put my purse in my seat to take off my sweater and settle in, her husband came over to sit in my husband's seat. He looked at me and said, "Oh, I need to sit next to my wife and baby." I responded, without moving out of his way, that it was my husband's seat, and he was in the bathroom. He said, "Would he mind sitting in my seat?" and proceeds to point all the way towards the back of the plane. I immediately responded, "I can speak on behalf of my husband, and that would be no." They both looked at me with confused looks on their faces like I somehow didn't have a right to politely decline. Then they tried to get the flight attendant's attention, but as they did that, the person sitting directly behind the woman with the baby lifted herself up from her seat and said, asterisk, "If you knew you were flying with a baby, you should have made sure your seats were booked together." Asterisk. They both looked at each other, then at the lady behind us, and blankly looked at me, while they mumbled something about trying to do just that, but couldn't for whatever reason. By then my husband was back and hers had already walked away. My husband sat down and I quietly told him what had just occurred, in case her husband might come back and ask him himself or bring the flight attendant over, and he was glad I didn't let his seat go. With it being a long flight and him having anxiety about flying, he definitely didn't want to be sent to the back of the plane alone, and I definitely didn't want to be alone sitting next to a couple with a small baby for hours across the Atlantic. But I was even more appreciative of the woman behind us who spoke up.